Have you ever felt completely invisible to the person who's supposed to love you most? What would it take for you to finally realize your own worth? My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I'm 34 years old. I've been married to David for 5 years, and until that anniversary dinner, I thought I knew what love looked like. I thought the quiet disappointments, the forgotten conversations, and the feeling of being alone, even when we were together, I thought that was just what marriage became after the honeymoon phase ended. I was wrong about a lot of things. David is a corporate lawyer at a prestigious firm downtown, the kind of man who wears expensive suits, drives a BMW, and can argue any point with surgical precision. When we met at a friend's wedding 7 years ago, I was impressed by his confidence, his ambition, his ability to command a room just by walking into it. He made me feel special, chosen, like I was the lucky one. Maybe I was lucky. Or maybe I just forgot to ask myself if he felt lucky to have me too. The problem started small, the way they always do. David would check his phone during dinner. He'd take calls during our weekend plans. He'd say, when I was telling him about my day, but I could tell he wasn't really listening. When I'd bring it up, he'd get defensive. I'm working hard for us, Sarah. This is how I provide for our life together. And I believed him. I made excuses for him. I told myself that successful men had different priorities, that his lack of attention didn't mean he loved me less. I convinced myself that I was being needy, that I should be grateful for the financial security he provided. But financial security doesn't keep you warm at night when your husband rolls over without saying goodnight. It doesn't fill the silence when you're eating dinner across from someone who's mentally reviewing contracts instead of looking at your face. Our 5th anniversary fell on a Thursday. David had forgotten completely until I mentioned it that morning over coffee. Oh, right, we should do something nice. Make a reservation somewhere. Not, let's celebrate. Not, I can't believe it's been 5 years. Just a task to be completed. But I held on to hope. Maybe a romantic dinner would remind us both of who we used to be together. Maybe it would be the reset we needed. I spent the afternoon getting ready like it was our first date. I wore the blue dress he'd once said was his favorite, though I couldn't remember the last time he'd complimented my appearance. I did my hair, put on makeup, even bought new earrings for the occasion. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman trying to be worthy of love instead of a woman who already was. David chose the restaurant, Le Bernardin. Expensive and impressive, the kind of place where you go to be seen as much as to eat. We arrived at 7:30, and I felt optimistic when the hostess led us to a quiet corner table with candles and white linens. This could be perfect, I thought. This could be ours. This is lovely, I said as we sat down, reaching across the table to touch his hand. Yeah, it's fine, he replied, already pulling out his phone. I just need to check on something quickly. That quickly lasted through the bread course, the appetizers, and halfway through our entrees. I sat there, smiling politely when the waiter asked how everything was, making small talk with myself, feeling more alone than I had in years. Other couples around us were talking, laughing, looking at each other. We were two strangers sharing an expensive table. But then something happened that changed everything. Something so small and simple that I almost missed.
The waiter's name was Michael. I learned this because he actually introduced himself when he approached our table, making eye contact with both of us, even though David didn't look up from his phone. Michael was probably in his late 20s, with kind brown eyes and the sort of genuine smile that made you feel like you mattered. "Good evening. I'm Michael, and I'll be taking care of you tonight," he said warmly. "Congratulations on your anniversary. 5 years is wonderful." I blinked in surprise. How did he know it was our anniversary? "I noticed when you made the reservation," he explained, catching my confused expression. "We like to make special occasions memorable here." David grunted something that might have been acknowledgement, his attention still glued to his screen. I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment. "Thank you," I said quietly. "That's very thoughtful." Michael's eyes lingered on me for just a moment, and I caught something there. Not pity exactly, but understanding, like he could see exactly what was happening at our table and didn't approve. Throughout the meal, Michael checked on us more frequently than necessary. Not in an intrusive way, but in a gentle attentiveness that David should have been showing me. When my water glass was empty, it was refilled before I could ask. When I mentioned the pasta was delicious, he smiled like my opinion actually mattered to him. "Your wife has excellent taste," he said to David while clearing our appetizer plates. "She chose one of our chef's signature dishes." David looked up briefly. Sarah's always been good with food stuff." Food stuff. 5 years of marriage, and that's how he described my interests to a stranger. Michael's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "She seems like someone who appreciates the finer things," he said diplomatically, but his eyes found mine with a warmth that made my heart skip. When dessert came, a beautiful chocolate souffle with "Happy Anniversary" written in raspberry sauce, David was deep in what sounded like a heated phone conversation about some urgent contract revision. He'd stepped away from the table without excusing himself, pacing near the restaurant's entrance while gesticulating emphatically. I sat alone, staring at the dessert I'd lost my appetite for. 5 years of marriage, and I was spending my anniversary watching my husband prioritize everyone else over me. Again. "I'm sorry," he said softly, appearing beside the table with a fresh napkin I didn't need. "This isn't how tonight should be going." I looked at him, this stranger who was showing me more consideration than my own husband. "It's fine," I said automatically, because that's what I always said. Work is demanding." Michael glanced toward David, who was now gesticulating wildly into his phone, completely oblivious to the restaurant around him. "With respect, ma'am, work is always demanding, but some things should come first." The simple truth of that statement hit me like a physical blow. Some things should come first. When was the last time I had come first for David? When was the last time anything about me had come first? "You deserve someone who sees you," Michael said quietly, setting down a small glass of champagne I hadn't ordered. "This is on the house. For you. Not the anniversary. Just for you." My hands trembled as I picked up the glass. "Thank you," I whispered, and I wasn't just thanking him for the champagne. David returned to the table as Michael walked away, sliding his phone into his pocket with the satisfied expression of someone who just closed an important deal. "Sorry about that. Emergency with the Peterson account. You know how it is." I did know how it was. I knew exactly how it was. And sitting there, holding a glass of champagne given to me by a stranger who'd shown me more kindness in one evening than my husband had shown me in months, I realized I was tired of knowing how it was. "David, do you know what today is?" He looked at me like I'd asked him to solve calculus. "Thursday?" "It's our anniversary. Our 5th wedding anniversary. We're at dinner celebrating 5 years of marriage, and you just spent an hour on the phone about work." David's expression shifted to defensive irritation. "Sarah, you know my job is important. That call couldn't wait. You understand that, right? I'm doing this for us." But as I looked at him, really looked at him, I realized he wasn't doing anything for us. He was doing everything for him and expecting me to be grateful for the scraps of attention he threw my way.
The ride home was silent except for the sound of David's thumbs tapping against his phone screen as he responded to emails from the passenger seat. I drove, which had become our routine since he was always too busy to focus on the road. Even when I was the one who'd gotten dressed up, who'd hoped for romance, who'd wanted to celebrate our marriage, I was still the one ensuring we got home safely while he attended to more important matters. "Good dinner," he said absently as we pulled into our driveway, like he was checking off a box on his to-do list. "Anniversary dinner? Complete." Inside our house, he disappeared immediately into his home office. "I've got a few more things to finish up," he called over his shoulder. "Don't wait up." I stood in our living room, still wearing my blue dress and the new earrings that no one had noticed, listening to the sound of his keyboard through the closed door. This was our anniversary night. This was how we'd marked 5 years of marriage, with indifference, interruptions, and a stranger showing me more respect than my own husband. That night, I lay in bed alone, staring at the ceiling and replaying Michael's words. You deserve someone who sees you. The simplicity of it was devastating. Not someone who loves you, not someone who takes care of you, someone who sees you, someone who notices when you're there and cares when you're not. When was the last time David had really seen me? Not just glanced in my direction or acknowledged my presence, but actually seen me, noticed what I was wearing, asked about my thoughts, cared about my feelings. I couldn't remember. The next morning, David was gone before I woke up. He'd left a note on the kitchen counter. Early meeting. Thanks for last night. D. Thanks for last night. Like I'd provided a service rather than shared an experience. Like I was the caterer at her own anniversary dinner. I called in sick to work, which wasn't entirely a lie. I felt sick. Sick with the realization of how small I'd allowed myself to become in my own marriage. Sick with the understanding that I'd been settling for crumbs when I deserved a feast. I spent the morning walking through our neighborhood, really looking at it for the first time in years. I noticed things I'd been too distracted to see before. The way Mrs. Henderson from down the street tended her garden with such care. The sound of children laughing in the park, and the couple from 2 houses over holding hands as they walked their dog. Everywhere I looked, I saw people living their lives fully, completely, while I'd been existing in the margins of mine. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in years. I drove back to Le Bernardin. I told myself I was being ridiculous. I told myself I was reading too much into a waiter's professional kindness. But as I sat in my car outside the restaurant, I knew I was there because someone had seen me when I felt invisible. And I needed to understand what that meant. The lunch shift was quieter, and I almost lost my nerve when I saw Michael behind the bar polishing glasses with the same careful attention he'd shown our table the night before. But when he looked up and saw me, his face broke into a genuine smile that made my decision feel right. "Sarah, isn't it?" he said, coming around the bar. "I hoped I'd see you again, though I'm a little surprised." "I wanted to thank you," I said, my voice steadier than I had expected, "for last night, for treating me like I mattered." His expression grew serious. "You do matter. That's what I was trying to tell you." We talked for an hour. Not about David, not about my marriage, but about me, about the marketing work I did for a nonprofit that helped fund literacy programs, about the photography classes I'd always wanted to take but never had time for, about the trip to Italy that I'd been dreaming about since college but had never mentioned to David because I knew he'd find reasons why we couldn't go. Michael listened to all of it like it was the most interesting conversation he'd ever had. He asked questions, shared his own dreams of opening a restaurant someday, made me laugh in a way I'd almost forgotten I could. "You light up when you talk about things you're passionate about," he said as our conversation wound down. "It's beautiful to watch." When was the last time someone had called me beautiful? When was the last time someone had noticed what made me light up? "I should go," I said, though I didn't want to. "Sarah," Michael said as I stood to leave, "I hope you don't think I'm overstepping, but you deserve to be with someone who celebrates you, not just tolerates you." That night, when David came home at almost 10 o'clock, I was waiting for him in the living room.
"We need to talk," I said, as David walked through the front door, loosening his tie with the exhausted expression he wore every evening. He paused in the entryway, his briefcase still in his hand. "Can it wait? It's been a long day, and I've got an early client call tomorrow." 6 months ago, I would have said yes. I would have swallowed my words, gone to bed feeling unheard, and convinced myself that timing wasn't right. But something had fundamentally shifted in me over the past 24 hours. "No," I said simply. "It can't wait." David sighed and set down his briefcase, but he remained standing near the door like he might need to make a quick escape. "Okay, what's going on?" "Last night was our 5th wedding anniversary." "I know that. We went to dinner, remember? Nice place, good food." "You spent an hour on the phone during our anniversary dinner. David's jaw tightened. Sarah, we've been through this. That was an emergency. The Peterson deal could have fallen apart if I hadn't. There's always an emergency, I interrupted, surprised by the steadiness in my own voice. There's always a call that can't wait, a client who needs immediate attention, a contract that's more important than our conversation. My job is demanding. You knew that when you married me. I married someone who made me feel like I mattered, someone who prioritized our relationship alongside his career. I didn't marry someone who treats me like an interruption to his real life. David moved into the living room now, settling into his usual chair with the air of someone preparing to win an argument. That's not fair, Sarah. Everything I do is for us. The long hours, the client calls, it's all so we can have the life we want. What life? The life where we don't talk during dinner? Where you forget our anniversary until I remind you? Where I feel lonelier when you're home than when you're gone? For the first time, David looked truly uncomfortable. He ran his hand through his hair and avoided my eyes. I don't know where this is coming from. We're fine, Sarah. We have a good life. We have your life, I corrected. I've been a supporting character in your story for so long that I almost forgot I was supposed to be writing my own. That's dramatic, even for you. The dismissiveness in his tone, that casual cruelty wrapped in exasperation, crystallized something inside me. This is how he saw me. Dramatic, needy, someone whose feelings were inconvenient obstacles to his productivity. Yesterday, I said carefully, a complete stranger treated me with more consideration in 2 hours than you've shown me in months. He saw that I was being ignored and cared enough to do something about it. A stranger, David. David's expression darkened. What stranger? What are you talking about? The waiter at the restaurant. Michael. While you were on your phone, he actually noticed that I was there. He brought me champagne and told me I deserved better. A waiter? David's voice rose with indignation. A waiter told you you deserved better, and you listened to him? Yes, I listened to him. Because he was right. Sarah, this is insane. You're upset about our dinner, so you're taking marriage advice from some kid who serves tables for a living? The condescension in his voice was breathtaking. Even now, even when I was trying to explain how alone I felt, he was more offended by the messenger than concerned about the message. This isn't about Michael. This is about the fact that it took a stranger's kindness to make me realize how badly you've been treating me. This is about 5 years of feeling invisible in my own marriage. David stood up abruptly. I don't have time for this melodrama. I work 60-hour weeks to provide for us. I bought you this house. I pay for your car, your clothes, everything you want. And you're complaining because I took one phone call during dinner? It wasn't one phone call. It's every phone call. It's every time you choose work over us. It's the way you talk to me like I'm an employee instead of your wife. You're being ridiculous. Then prove it, I said, standing to face him. Put your phone away right now, sit down with me, and have an actual conversation. Ask me about my day, my feelings, my dreams. Show me that I matter more than your email. David stared at me for a long moment, his phone already in his hand, though I hadn't seen him take it out. The fact that his first instinct was to reach for it, even during this conversation, told me everything I needed to know. Sarah, I can't just ignore my responsibilities because you're having some kind of crisis. This isn't a crisis. This is clarity.
That conversation became the first of many over the following weeks, but each one followed the same pattern. I would try to explain how disconnected I felt, and David would defend his behavior by pointing to his financial contributions. I would ask for his time and attention, and he would promise to do better while simultaneously checking his phone. It was like trying to have a meaningful relationship with someone who was always looking over your shoulder for something more important. But something had awakened in me that couldn't be put back to sleep. I started noticing things I'd trained myself to ignore. The way David interrupted me when I was talking. How he made decisions about our social plans without consulting me. The fact that he knew my schedule, but I had no idea what his days actually looked like beyond busy. I also started doing things for myself that I'd stopped doing somewhere along the way. I signed up for the photography class I'd been wanting to take. I made plans with friends I'd been neglecting. I even started researching that trip to Italy, not as something we might do together, but as something I might do alone. The more I reconnected with myself, the more foreign my marriage felt. It was like putting on clothes that no longer fit, technically possible, but uncomfortable and obviously wrong. 3 weeks after our anniversary dinner, I found myself back at Le Bernardin. Not intentionally this time. I was meeting my friend Jessica for lunch, and she'd chosen the restaurant. But when I saw Michael behind the bar, I felt a flutter of something I'd almost forgotten existed. Anticipation at seeing someone who was genuinely happy to see me. "Sarah," he said warmly when he spotted me. "How are you doing?" "Better," I said, and realized it was true. Much better, actually. We only talked briefly. He was working, and Jessica was waiting. But in those few minutes, I felt more seen and valued than I had in my own home all week. "You look different," he said as I was leaving. "Happier? More yourself." That evening, I tried to share my excitement about the photography class with David. I'd taken my first roll of film that weekend and gotten the prints back, black and white shots of the city that had turned out better than I'd expected. "Look at these," I said, spreading the photographs across our kitchen table. "I'm really getting the hang of manual settings." David glanced over from his laptop for approximately 3 seconds. "Nice. Very artsy. I was thinking about entering some of them in the community center's amateur exhibition next month." "Sure, if you want," he said, already turning back to his screen. "Just don't let it interfere with the Hendersons' dinner party next weekend." I stared at him. This man I'd married who could dismiss something I was passionate about with such casual indifference. "Don't let it interfere. David, this is important to me." "I know, and I think it's great that you have a hobby. But we have obligations." A hobby. Something I cared about, something that brought me joy and made me feel alive, and he called it a hobby. Like it was a phase I'd grow out of or a distraction from my real responsibilities. That night, as David worked in his office and I developed prints in the makeshift darkroom I had set up in our basement, I realized something that should have been obvious months ago. I didn't want to save this marriage anymore. I wanted to save myself from it. The revelation didn't come with anger or drama. It came with a quiet, profound relief. Like finally admitting to yourself that you've been wearing shoes that don't fit and deciding to walk barefoot instead. I didn't leave David that night, or even that week. Ending a 5-year marriage isn't something you do impulsively, no matter how clear your feelings become. But I did start making plans, quiet, careful plans for a life that belonged entirely to me. I opened my own bank account for the first time since we'd gotten married. I researched apartments in neighborhoods I'd always loved, but never considered because they weren't convenient to David's office. I started having honest conversations with friends about what I'd been going through, instead of pretending everything was fine. The most surprising thing was how supportive everyone was. I had expected people to urge me to work harder on my marriage, to suggest counseling or compromise. Instead, friend after friend told me they'd been waiting for me to realize what they'd seen for years, that I'd disappeared inside a relationship that only served one person. "You used to be so vibrant," Jessica said over coffee one Saturday morning. "Always planning adventures, always excited about something. I've missed that version of you." Had I really changed that much? Looking back, I could see it now. The gradual dimming of my enthusiasm, the way I'd learned to make myself smaller to avoid David's irritation, the slow erosion of my identity until I was just David's wife instead of Sarah. But I was finding my way back to Sarah, and she was someone worth fighting for. The end came, fittingly, during another dinner out. David had suggested it, which surprised me, until I realized he was trying to secure my cooperation for a work event he needed me to attend, a client's fundraising gala where I was expected to smile prettily and make small talk while he networked. It's important for my career that we present well as a couple, he explained over our appetizers, his attention split between me and his phone as usual. Present well, I repeated. Like we're a performance? You know what I mean. These people make judgments based on family stability, social compatibility. Your being there matters. My being there? Or me being there? He looked confused by the distinction. What's the difference? And there it was, the question that summed up our entire relationship. To David, there was no difference between my presence and my personhood. I was a supporting element in his professional presentation, as interchangeable as his tie or his watch. I'm not coming to the gala, I said quietly. What? Sarah, this is important. I already told them you'd be there. Then you shouldn't have assumed. David set down his fork, his expression shifting from confusion to annoyance. What's gotten into you lately? Ever since that anniversary dinner, you've been acting strange, distant. I've been acting like myself. Well, I don't like it. The honesty of that statement hung between us like a verdict. He didn't like me when I was myself. He preferred the version of me that accommodated his needs without expressing my own, that smiled and nodded and never asked for more than he was willing to give. I know you don't. That's why I'm leaving. David blinked. Leaving where? The restaurant? Leaving you, our marriage, this life that only works for one of us. For the first time in months, I had his complete attention. His phone sat forgotten on the table as he stared at me with genuine shock. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious about anything. Sarah, this is insane. You can't just leave because we've hit a rough patch. Marriage takes work. I've been doing all the work. I've been accommodating, understanding, flexible, patient. I've been everything except happy. We can fix this. We can go to counseling, take a vacation, whatever you need. But I could hear it in his voice. The calculation, the negotiation tactics he used with difficult clients. Even now, he was trying to manage me rather than understand me. What I need is to remember who I am when someone isn't constantly telling me it's not enough. I moved out the following week, taking only what belonged to me before our marriage and what I'd accumulated afterward that had meaning beyond its monetary value. My photographs, my books, the painting I'd bought from a local artist that David had always said didn't match our decor. The apartment I found was small but bright, with big windows and exposed brick walls that felt more like home than the showcase house David and I had shared. I hung my photographs on those walls and felt proud in a way I'd forgotten I could feel. David alternated between anger and bargaining during those first few weeks. He couldn't understand why I was throwing away our life over what he saw as minor marital adjustments. He offered to work fewer hours, take me on vacation, even go to couples therapy. All the things I'd been asking for months, now offered as desperate concessions to prevent a consequence he'd never seen coming. But it was too late for concessions. I'd already discovered what it felt like to be seen, valued, and prioritized. I'd remembered what it was like to wake up excited about my day instead of resigned to it. I couldn't go back to sleepwalking through my own life. The divorce was finalized 6 months later. David was professional about it, treating the dissolution of our marriage like any other contract negotiation. We split our assets equitably, kept our lawyers civil, and signed papers that legally ended what had emotionally ended that night at Le Bernardin. On the day our divorce was finalized, I did something I'd been planning for weeks. I went back to the restaurant one last time. Michael was there, of course, polishing glasses with the same careful attention I remembered. When he saw me, his face lit up with that genuine warmth that had first made me feel human again. "Sarah," he said, coming around the bar, "you look radiant." "I feel radiant," I said, and meant it. "I wanted to thank you again for seeing me when I couldn't see myself." "You did the hard part," he replied. "I just reminded you that you were worth seeing." We talked for a while about everything and nothing. He told me about his plans to open his restaurant. They were more concrete now, with investors interested and a location scouted. I told him about my photography, which had evolved from a hobby into freelance work that was actually paying my bills. "I'm proud of you," he said as our conversation wound down, "for choosing yourself." As I walked back to my car, I felt a deep sense of completion, not because I'd gotten some kind of romantic closure, but because I'd come full circle. I'd returned to the place where I had first remembered my own worth, now as someone who never intended to forget it again. That was 2 years ago. I never saw Michael again after that day. I heard through mutual acquaintances that his restaurant opened successfully in a different part of the city. I never felt the need to seek him out because what he'd given me wasn't about him. It was about the reminder that I deserved better and the courage to believe that was true. I'm 36 now, and my life looks nothing like what I thought it would at this age. I'm single, living in a small apartment, building a photography business one client at a time. I travel when I want to, eat dinner with friends who actually listen when I talk, and wake up each morning excited about the possibilities the day might hold. I'm not saying my life is perfect or that leaving David solved all my problems, but it solved the biggest one. I stopped living like I was grateful for whatever scraps of attention I could get and started insisting on the love I deserved. Sometimes I think about that anniversary dinner, about how different my life might have looked if a kind stranger hadn't taken the time to see my sadness and do something about it. But mostly I'm just grateful. Grateful for Michael's kindness, yes, but more grateful for my own strength in recognizing it and acting on it. Because that's what it really takes to change your life. Not a dramatic gesture or a perfect moment of clarity, but the quiet courage to believe you deserve better and the strength to prove it to yourself.
Have you ever had someone show you kindness when you needed it most, even if they were just a stranger? Sometimes it takes an outside perspective to help us see our own worth. Share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear how a moment of unexpected kindness changed your perspective. Thank you for listening to the story here at Hidden Hearth, where we explore the moments that reshape our understanding of love, worth, and what we're willing to accept in our lives. If this resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe for more stories about finding the courage to choose yourself. Your support means the world to us. And remember, you deserve to be seen, valued, and loved for exactly who you are.